Hey there, Aligned You listeners, Dr. M here, and welcome to our new series called Coach's Corner. In this series, I'll be talking to some amazing coaches from around the world who all have a unique focus of how they actually help their clients. A lot of people wonder, why would they actually have a coach in their world? And we dive deeper into it in this particular series. Enjoy, and I look forward to catching you next time. I'm your host, Dr. M, and you're listening to Aligned You, a podcast designed to assist you to truly be aligned through your body, head, and heart so you can reach your full potential in your own unique way. Hey there, Aligned You listeners, Dr. M here, and welcome to this week's episode. This week, I am very excited. We have our next edition of our Coach's Corner series, and my special guest today, the amazing Marcus Pearce, has been a dear friend of mine. For goodness, Marcus, we'll have to add it up. I think we're coming up 2 decades, my friend. If we're not already there, we're getting goddamn close. Marcus is a dear friend of mine, and he's just an all-round amazing human. He's magnificently obsessed with helping people create their exceptional life. A former journalist, radio and television producer, Marcus has interviewed hundreds of the world's most graceful ages, high achievers, and interesting people, many of them on his podcast, 100 Not Out. He's the author of the best-selling book, Your Exceptional Life. If you look over my back back shoulder, you'll see his book up on the shelves behind me at MRC. As I said, the author of the best-selling book, Your Exceptional Life, creator of the Exceptional Life Blueprint, and longevity coach to people hungry to make the rest of their life their best of their life. He's a keynote speaker on longevity and life design. Marcus has delivered trainings to companies as big as NAB to local communities. Sectors including banking, health, wellness, and real estate trust Marcus to help their teams perform to exceptional standards. And when I was putting together the group of coaches for this particular series, MP, you were top of mind and the first person I actually messaged. So thank you so much for agreeing, jumping on the mic again with me. It's not the first time you've been on Aligned You, but it has been a little minute. How are you, MP?
Yeah, so good. And thanks for having me back, Dr. M. And I do love that you've got the book on your shelf there at MRC. And yeah, we have been in each other's worlds for at least 15 years.
I reckon it was 2008,
I reckon. Started in Hawaii.
Did.
And it's been global. We almost had you in Ikaria or Sardinia in 2020. We would have been multi-continental.
Did that COVID little thing called Rona. Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, no, it's been a minute. So can't wait to have another deeper, meaningful conversation with you and your listeners.
Oh, thanks, MP. So Marcus, as he alluded to, we've known each other for a very long time. We actually met in the airport properly in Honolulu as we were actually flying home from a seminar that we'd both been in, but we actually hadn't met each other really in that seminar. All I remember was that he was a really burnt guy because he'd tried to use coconut oil as his sunscreen when in Hawaii, and it kind of failed miserably as far as protecting his skin. We might talk a bit about that and the different fads.
I fell asleep on the beach the day before the seminar, and I was a bit of a cocky Victorian thinking, oh my gosh, I'm away from the winter. And I woke up a few hours later and did the good old male thing. It'll be fine. She'll be right. And I think the very next day I was wrapped in an aloe vera cucumber full body wrap at a wellness spa in Honolulu, thinking I was being body bagged. Instead, I was just being saved by the wellness industry of Honolulu because, I was cooked.
Yes, absolutely. I don't think it would have been the first time they'd seen a white Australian from Victoria having got that whole scenario wrong. I reckon they had their ideal avatar client and then they had a picture of you, Marcus. Yeah. It's definitely how that rolled.
Yeah,
I love that. But it actually, ironically, perhaps not ironically, it might bring us to one of my first questions for you today, which is the premise of this particular interview series, Marcus, as I spoke about offline, was that I want to interview a series of people who are amazing coaches, and that more often than not, coaches have a particular lens or viewpoint that they take their clients through. And whether it's keynote speaking or one-to-one coaching with people, with the work that you do, very much so, your view around longevity, I find fascinating. You've done so much research about it over the many, many moons that we've known each other. But I do remember when we met back in 2008, I'm pretty sure you were in your vegan era. You were definitely in your coconut smearing era, oil era of, no sunscreens, but coconut coconut oil. And I'd love to know more, and perhaps you could share with the Aligned You listeners as to what shifted for you that you moved out of that era and into perhaps an era of more balance. And I don't know if you were the moderation or if you have a different word for it, but I'd love to hear more about that.
Good question. I think there's a great line, and it could be Tony Robbins or someone else, but it's like you can be sincere, but you can also be sincerely wrong. And I think when I look back over those years of, I'm going to say mid to late 20s, and a lot of people in that phase of life that are interested in health and wellness, I don't want to say going to extremes, but they will almost do anything in a pursuit of learning and experience and discovery. And so I know at the time the vegan diet was very much marketed as the healthiest diet on the earth, the most humane, obviously, full of love and peace, love and mung beans and all the rest of it. And so it did at that point in life, I felt like the pinnacle of enlightenment. I felt like a mid-20s version of Mahatma Gandhi and thought that I was God's gift to humanity because I was on the vegan diet. And I can say all this tongue firmly in cheek because I am no longer vegan, but it was a 7-year adventure. And I was shaving with avocado, yes, smearing my body in coconut oil, having lentil bolognese every second night in between a chickpea or a makhani dal option. I was thinking that was the right path to live. And as I said, I was sincerely wrong, as well as my beautiful wife, Sarah. We were sincerely wrong. And I think it came down to a conversation that we had with fellow chiropractor and human behavioral specialist, Dr. John DeMartini, who actually just pulled out the flip chart at an event once and said, okay, Marcus, in the East, we have a very plant-based focus. If you think of in India, where it's like 50% vegetarians and there might be 50%, that eat meat. In the West, there's very much a focus on animal protein, but somewhere in the middle is perhaps wisdom. And it is a messy middle. There's no doubt about it. There's nuance. There's individuality. I often, talk about your history, your ethnic history or your ancestry, Dr. M. Like it's complex and exotic. And so
I am a genetic experiment, MP.
Yeah.
A genetic experiment is what I am.
Ethnic, generic, and genetic.
Nothing generic about me. Definitely genetic.
No, I meant to put a T and replace the R. A genetic experiment. But it did, that experience and that conversation with DeMartini, but even those 7 years probably rammed home the fact that we all are individual in nature, but in health and wellness and in many things, we buy into I don't want to say the lowest common denominator, that's not the word. We buy into a way that is, many people then think is the way. We all have to be entrepreneurs. We all have to invest in real estate. We all have to buy crypto. We all have to go vegan. And we do live in an even more black and white nature, thanks to, again, mainstream media combined with technology. And I come from a mainstream media background, as you know, but when you combine mainstream media with the speed of technology, we now dance in the outrage of black and white, right and wrong, far more quickly than we used to, where we could only get our hands on one newspaper a day and we only had a 6 o'clock news and we only had, our only constant source of media was really radio. Whereas now we are more polarized than ever before. And so I suppose, to answer your question, I think the time spent being sincerely wrong kind of allowed me to go, well, hold on a minute, maybe health and wellness, and then to a further extent, to my epiphany, longevity is not just as simple as what you eat. Diet is not the fountain of youth, but that is the propaganda, dare I say it, that we are fed and fed more than ever today.
And I think one of the things that you touched on when it comes to the media that is so much at our fingertips is that often particularly when it's a social media platform, is then it confirms all of our sincerely wrong theories, because we end up in that rabbit hole and that vortex of the same information because we've liked or said to Siri we like it, and then all of a sudden Siri proves us right.
And then all of a sudden you're on the carnivore diet and everyone else is wrong and you are right. because everyone you see on the socials is on the carnivore diet as well. And
that many people can't be wrong.
No, that's right. It's evidence. Haven't you seen the evidence?
Haven't you seen the evidence?
The science on my socials. Anyway, I'm sounding jaded. We'll sound like I'm jaded.
We'll sound old and bitter in a moment, MP. Let's not go down that path. Because those are the people that know us and are regular listeners to either one of our podcasts know that that's far from the truth. But we could pretend for a moment that we are. But I do think it's very interesting, particularly with that the bias that then the media continues to prove us right, even though I love that line that we're sincerely wrong. I want to dive into a little more, which this is around your exceptional life blueprint, MP, because I love the premise of it. I have done one of your 2 days, or I've been a part of and a participant of one of your 2-day events up in Byron Bay. And I love the simplicity of the formula and the complexity that it allows you to develop in life to actually create an exceptional life for yourself. I'd love perhaps if you could share with our listeners a bit more why you were inspired to create it, and also what are the top tenets of it? What actually inspired it, and what are the top components of it, or the bits of it that you're really happy to share with our Aligned You listeners so they have some take-homes from our conversation today?
Oh, cool. Well, that might be the last question you have to ask, because I can just go on.
I have a feeling, absolutely.
Well, it all stemmed from questions, and again, it all stemmed from, well, if diet's not the fountain of youth, then what is? If I've been sincerely wrong for these years, thinking that the vegan diet was the way to live to 100, and perhaps I'm wrong, then again, as a journalist, the best part of being wrong is you then find an angle, because it's like, then what's right? And often there's an uncovering of a story there. So what I tended to find, and it started back in 2010, but it was really when I called, our great mutual friend, Dr. Damien Christoph, and said, how do you feel about doing a podcast on longevity? And he said, yeah, I'm 39, scared of turning 40. Let's do it. And we started interviewing vegans, and then people that ate terribly. And then we had people that were still working in their 80s and 90s and had retired but had returned back to work. We had people that were competing in Ironman triathlons and crossing over the finish line in their mid-80s. We had psychologists climbing Everest in their 60s but eating Mars bars whilst doing the gardening. So there were people that we were interviewing that were breaking all of the rules, and your mental brain is going, no, this can't be, because it's kind of tearing apart everything that you thought a great long life was all about. And so this whole exceptional life blueprint epiphany for me has all been, I suppose, in the admission, and it starts off with a proposal. If I propose that I am wrong in most areas of life, what could I possibly learn? And so it really came from, well, does family come first? And then it's like, well, let's go and interview war survivors that lost their family members, or mothers that have buried their children, and even fathers that have buried their children, but they are still living a great long life. Well, okay, maybe family doesn't come first for longevity, because it actually have a lot of people that are still alive that have buried family members. So what comes first for longevity? And you go to a lot of personal growth events, and it's all like, start a business, or it's more like, get wealthy and do crypto, or it's like, practice tantric sex, and it's like, then you found the nirvana of life. And it's like, oh my gosh, okay, well, hold on, what is it? And then the more that we would interview, and the more that I would do my own independent research to cut this story short, what I found was that the people that were inspired in their daily lives, so let's call it 9 to 5, a bit more nuance than that, but people that loved their 9 to 5, people that were regularly physically active, they were living greater, longer lives than the people that ate the best diet. And this was like, because people that were moving the car, even if the fuel they put in the car wasn't the best fuel, people that were moving the car, moving their bodies, whether it was playing golf, doing the gardening, going into Ironmans, doing CrossFit, yoga, going for a walk in their lunch break, whatever it was, the physically active were living longer than those that had great diets. But in between movement and nutrition was a great social life. And again, this is another... I read a study from Harvard, from Lisa Berkman, that was done over 30 plus years, and it showed over 7,000 people from California were studied, and it showed that people that had great social lives and average diets lived longer than people with great diets but average social lives. And it was like, oh my gosh, this was really clear. But the best part about it was people that lived the longest had great diets and great social lives. And that for me is a massive thing in my work with people is we must be an and human being, not an or human being. A lot of us are, do we eat well or do we move well? You know what? Life and an exceptional life is you've got to love your daily life. You've got to do work that you love, and you've got to have a physically active life, socially active life, a great diet. Doesn't have to be perfect, but great family relationships, which takes a lot of work, acceptance, appreciation, forgiveness, and so on. You've got to have fun. The amount of people that I know, sadly, that are working a great job and they've got great friends and they've got great family, but they're actually not having fun. Like they're doing all the right things, but they're not enjoying themselves. I'm like, oh, what a waste. We've got to work that out. We've got to spend less than we earn and invest the difference. And you and I speak about wealth all the time. And if you're in Australia or a wealthy nation, as I say, if you can't handle the heat in the kitchen of living in a country with a high cost of living, you do have to move to Bali or Thailand or somewhere where your dollar can go further, because it's hard to have the lifestyle that you want living in Australia or another wealthy nation. And then I wrap your spirit, soul, and faith around those 7 preceding ingredients. So for me, in my observation and research, longevity is purpose, movement, and social life. Now, again, after those 3 ingredients of longevity, who wants longevity without quality of life? So quality of life is your nutrition, your family, your growth, and your wealth. You can argue that, yes, they might add a year or 2 to your longevity. But again, there's also conversations around this that kind of break that mold. And then we put our spirit, soul, and faith into everything. And that is, if I was drawing it, it's a triangle with a circle around it. And that is the exceptional life blueprint. But that is about, 10 or 15 years of research and application, and then working with people and traveling to these European blue zones and helping people. Again, my corny one-liner is help them make the rest of their life the best of their life. But it is a matter of being exceptional over mediocre, because, and this is my last thing on this, the consequences of mediocrity are dire. And if you stuff up just one of those 8 areas of life, that stuffing up will infect every one of the other areas of life that you may have done well in. And dementia is perhaps the greatest example of that, but I could do that with every other consequence of mediocrity as well. So I'll leave it there, because I'll just take over your podcast in a minute and talk forever.
That's all right. I could listen to you all day, MP. And when we get going, I think there's very few people in the world that can speak as fast as we can, but we can match each other and we can accelerate each other, and we still know exactly what each other are saying, and other people are watching going, what the actual F just happened? But I really, as I said earlier, I think the simplicity of that, MP, please, for the Aligned You listeners, do not underestimate the power of that simplicity. And again, you and I have spoken about this offline before, is that part of the reason why people pay us a lot of money to come and speak to their organizations and their corporate events is because we both have the ability to simplify the complex, and to be able to have the ability, Marcus, to be able to nut out 7 tenets or pillars or what's the other word for it? Platforms that people can actually accelerate from and off into a life that's exceptional, I think is a remarkable feat in itself. And it's taken you many, many years to develop and to finesse.
Well, just a quick one on this, because you're right, this is simple, but it's not easy. And I have a client at the moment who is on the verge of an incredible deal with a sporting organisation, and he's been putting all of his work into this proposal, and it's just been signed off, and it's very exciting. But what has happened, and he's now admitting this, is that his physical health has, for want of a better term, suffered. And I said to him, I'm not going to say his name, Jacko, we'll make up a name, Jacko, I don't care about this deal right now if you don't prioritise your physical health over the next 2 weeks. You will suffer the consequences, which could look like getting to the starting line of actually doing the work for this organisation, and you not having the health to actually get it done. And there are so many stories of people that have achieved something great, but the cost of that has been disastrous, and that has infected other areas of life. Whether it's you get the deal but your marriage is falling apart, you get the deal but you're lonely and you're never seeing your friends and you're in a silo in a corner desk, you get the deal and you're not moving your body, your diet's falling to pieces, whatever it is. This is really important that we consider that this is a simple framework, but it is an art form. Reminds me of chiropractic in many ways, Maria. Like, it is a simple premise, but it is an absolute art form to be able to carry it out. And that's why, you know, you and I like to work with people, because it is in the art of applying it and executing it where people really need the help, because easier said than done, I suppose.
Absolutely. And to your point, MP, when you're talking about the fact that, you know, if one area is off, it can infect the other areas. For those people that are listening that might be thinking, holy fuck, I've got four things that are actually out of alignment at the moment. Have you got some simple or some starting points, not necessarily simple, ways that people can start getting the car back on the tracks?
Oh, perfect. And this is going to sound incredibly self-promotional, but it's not intended to. I think the most important thing is just to find out where you are now. Find out where you are now. So the best way to do it, again, I have a quiz. People can go to the website. You can pop the link in the show notes, whatever you like.
Yep.
But if people do the Exceptional Life quiz and rate themselves out of 10 in each area of life, and then the second question in the quiz is like, what's the gap? So you might go, my nutrition's a 5 out of 10. What's the gap? It's concerning how many people say, oh, the time to eat quality food or the time to prepare quality food. But if you find yourself saying time is getting in the way, it's a really good smack in the face to go, hold on, I'm in this time poor rat race right now. And the only thing that we all have equal in life is the 24 hours that we have in the day. So if that is the case, identify where do your priorities, and this is where responsibility, and I'm kind of going high level here because I know the Aligned You listeners are playing a bigger game. If you don't take responsibility for this, no one else will. And so whether that, for me in 2024, it's working tradie hours. I'm making 250 dinners this year, Maria, because I want Sarah to actually have a rest in the afternoon. And I maintain that you get nothing done between 4 and 5 in the workplace. Like as a chiropractor, you do because people are coming in. But if you're at home, working from home, at a desk, you're in an office, not much gets done between 4 and 5. And so we've got to be really clear about it's not time management here. This is life management. And so if you're getting low scores in 3 or 4 areas, I don't want to talk about interpersonal relationships right now, because if you're in a difficult marriage or a difficult workplace and so on, that requires a far bigger conversation. But if you're looking at it and your answers about the gaps, what's the gap? The time to exercise, the time to eat well, the time to catch up with my friends. Like this is like, oh, this is going, hold on a minute. You have a life design issue here. And that's where I really love to help people pop open their calendars and actually see where are they spending the time. But I do think if we can look at the low scores and then make, again, very cliche here, but make one small step to improve, because the dopamine hit of actually improvement can become quite infectious. And if you ever hear people go, oh, I'm a personal growth junkie, or I'm like addicted to going to the gym or the chiro or eating well, like if you have a great habit that you know is really good for you, you will form a healthy addiction to it. And if you can form the habit of creating an exceptional life, Socrates said the unexamined life is not worth living. If you can just do this quiz, it's a free quiz, do it every week. If you can examine your life every week, you can actually get a healthy obsession, a healthy addiction to going, oh, I can see where I can tweak this. I can tweak the way I'm using screen time at night. I can tweak where I'm reading or not reading. I can tweak where I've got time for myself. I can tweak where I'm spending quality time with my loved ones. And that healthy obsession is a really clear pathway to an exceptional life.
I love that. And I love the action steps in the right direction and identifying that gap. And also, it's true. We all have 168 hours in a week. And one of the exercises I take people through is actually breaking down how you're using it. And I've only ever had one person, MP, one person that was in a deficit. And this particular person was running a working farm, had a full-time job, was doing an MBA at the time. Her husband was also working away and she was looking after her kids. She was the only person I've ever met that's been in deficit when they've actually done that particular exercise. There's plenty of time that more often than not, people end up with 20 or 30 hours a week that they could be using better. Once I made the mistake of saying to somebody, they were wasting their time watching television, and a particular client really arced up. She's like, it's not a waste of time to me. I was like, okay, well, maybe you could allocate a couple of those 20 hours a week towards doing something else, if you so choose. So I'm not going to say anything is a waste of time, but having an awareness of whether you could reallocate your time is so powerful. I'd love to ask you a little bit about your tours to the Blue Zones, or the Blue Zone, now soon to be Zones, because there's an all new, I saw the new footage coming out of your soon to be next adventure with the amazing Dr. Damien Christoph. Looks quite sensational. And yes, folks, the borders of the world shutting down did mean that I didn't get to go to Ikaria with Marcus and with DK. So I'd love to hear more about what are some of the biggest learns you've made by going into the Blue Zones. Perhaps you could explain to the Aligned You listeners what the hell is a Blue Zone to start with. And what have been some of your biggest takeaways from watching people live life at a different pace and what they prioritize?
Oh, wow. So first of all, National Geographic about 20 years ago, identified 5 locations on the planet where they experience greater longevity and quality of life in that longevity. So in health terms, we're talking about less morbidity than what we experience. And one of the most profound places, without doubt, is this small Greek island, Ikaria, where they experience 80% less dementia, wrap your head around that, 50% less cancer and 20% less heart disease. And you say those stats flippantly, but dementia is the one thing that I find people would say is the worst way to die. It has an 8-year diagnosis to death time frame. Many people that have experienced it in their family almost see it as like, I don't want to die like my mum or dad. And so for me, the trip to Ikaria is incredibly powerful if that is a spiritual urgency that you feel, that you've got mortality staring you in the face, but you want quality in your quantity of life. What I'm about to say is going to be just information on a podcast that you could probably hear. I've done dozens of podcasts, over 50 episodes of this type of content of being interviewed. And it's like, I'm going to say stuff that I've said before, but I often say, like, you can't learn something until you experience it. And so for me, taking people there, I think we go there for the 5th time this year. It's because the insights are deeply profound, but different for everyone. So I can only share with you now what I've experienced from my own lessons, because I remember landing there for the 2nd time in 2018 thinking, what am I going to learn this time? I've already been here. Maybe I'm just bringing people to have their experience. And every time I go there, the experience is deeper. And as you say, yes, we're also going to Sardinia this year as well. But here's some of the biggest things, and they're a bit esoteric, so bear with me. I remember a lady almost in tears, one of our attendees in 2019, because she was deeply moved and somewhat uncomfortable by the level of emotional availability she was presented with by the locals. It made her uncomfortable because in her life and lifestyle, everything was busy, everything was to do, everything was get it done, and there was a lot of time for being a good old human doing, but not much time for being a human being. And it really made it clear to her how far she'd been removed from, let's just say, the spiritual culture in which she would like to live. And so that can be confronting. We've had people that, let's say, live in the burbs or live in the big city that have relocated, to regionals. But we've also had other people relocate from land to neighborhoods or the big city because they recognize that they want more contact with human beings. This is why I say the insights are deeply profound. I had one lady just last year say she realized she needed, and for people that have ancestry here, you'll understand this, she realized that she needed to be less Vulcan and more Ikarian, in that she'd been very almost too stoic and too bull in a china shop, and she had to just take a breath and just relax and recognize that no one's dying here. Let's just learn to relax a little bit. And these were very weirdly awkward insights, because we had moments where like she realized that she didn't want to share food and she wanted her allotment of the hot chips or the bread, and it was very much like cut and dried. And so for me, like, I can talk about this, but the insights that people have are so unique and so, like, they're honestly not bizarre, but it's like, oh my gosh. Like, I realized last year, and this is for me, right, who's worn glasses ever since I was 12, that a night before we arrived in Ikaria, Damien and I were having dinner in Athens, and we told them, they're like, doing the tourist thing, oh, why are you in Athens and what are you here for? And we're like, oh, we're going to Ikaria tomorrow. And they're like, oh my gosh, Ikaria, I've gone there 10 times, as a child, and we go camping. And I'm like, oh, great. And they're like, why do you go to Ikaria? They're almost like, no one goes to Ikaria in Greece. Like, it's, yes, it's a blue zone, but everyone goes to,
so random.
all the rest. So I said to him, well, why do you go to Ikaria? And he said, you know what is amazing about Ikaria is you can always see the horizon and no one wears glasses. And I'm like, oh my gosh, no one wears glasses. And he said, yeah, and I think it's because they're always got the natural wonders of the world around them. They can always see the ocean. They're living, this will sound almost conspiracy theorist here, they're living a 3D experience, like not 2D, like screen time that you and I are having. They're living a 3D experience. Not 4D, folks, not 5D, 3D, purely 3D. And they are constantly challenging themselves in the fact that they're in the garden or they have to look out at the horizon or they've got all these different textures of plants and animals and flowers and food and life. And that was very confronting for me because when I got there and I'm looking out at the elders, we're going to festivals and you're looking at the elderly and I'm like, oh my gosh, there are not many prescription glasses here.
How
and so for me,
interesting.
again, that might sound so useless, but what I'm saying is like the experience is different for everyone. Yeah,
I can see where perhaps a different way of putting it is for those people's experience and the uniqueness of the experience is they're bringing their daily content or their framework that they have in their daily life in Australia or from around the world, depending on where they're from, their day-to-day city life, suburban life, country life, and then they're putting it into such a different container, being the island of Ikaria that has such a different viewpoint than which they're used to. So they're trying to bring the same content into a very different container, and that in itself becomes such a big, I can imagine only create such a big gap, to use your language, MP, of like, what WTF is going on? And what do you mean you're not giving me my portion of bread? And now I'm missing out on life. Like, for however many decades I've been used to having my section of bread that I can decide at what pace I'm going to eat it versus, oh, okay, this is just such a new, who am I going to be or what is my new content in this new arena? And I can see why that would create such a unique perspective for depending on who's in it, or for beautiful self like you and I who, we wear specs. I've worn specs since I was 8. One of my first conversations with other people who wear glasses is, where do you get your frames from? And so to actually go somewhere where there's no pattern match, where are all the glasses? Where's the frame shop? What am I going to do? It becomes a pattern match thing. No optometrist. I'm screwed. If my glasses break, I'm done.
You can't find an optometrist. There's not a supermarket. There's just like what we would call mini marts. There's 2 police stations, but one of them is empty and the other one has 2 cops in there, and the phone diverts from the empty one to their one. There's no crime on the island. The hospital is not that flash. So if something happens, you go there. But if you do something like you need surgery, you're going to Athens. Like, this is the stuff that gets people really thinking, right? But the other thing is, so the island of Ikaria, the whole island is considered a blue zone, right? The whole island is the same wherever you go. 8,500 people, the lifestyle is the same. But in Sardinia, which for me is more of a reflection of the modern world, it's a needle in a haystack. It's literally 100 times bigger in landmass. It's 100 times bigger in population. You're going from 8.5. Anyway, do all the numbers. But the key is there's only 13 villages that are considered a blue zone. And when you go to these places, it's so different to like that glitz and glam that a lot of people think of with Sardinia. And so that for me is a more true metaphor of how many of us live, because in a country like Australia, you just know maybe an old lady, you know, Margaret around the corner, she's 102 and she lives by herself. She is the human form of a needle in a longevity haystack in Australia. Like, we don't have this concentration of elders and wise souls that we can see all the time. They're very far removed, and unfortunately the majority of people that are getting older in Australia end up in a nursing home or with some form of compromised quality of life. And so we don't necessarily look up to them as a mentor or as a model for getting older. But in these villages of Sardinia, there are so many models, so many centenarians, graceful ages that are models. And so part of my agenda here is for people to then have these experiences with us and then want to be that model in the years to come. To recognize that longevity requires leadership. Like I say, socializing requires leadership. These tenets, these ingredients of living a great long life require a version of self-leadership that cannot happen to us. Like, a lot of people think their genes just happen to them. That is not true. You and I know that. Like, environment and the environment that we place ourselves in the leadership and creation of our lives. This is what these blue zone populations, let's say, have been doing innately for years, centuries even, without having to write it on a to-do list and without having to create their exceptional life blueprint. That wisdom has been passed on through the years, through the families, through the generations. And our, I suppose, idea in this is to somewhat reverse engineer it by bringing people on these experiences and then applying that wisdom to their own individual lives.
I love that, MP. And one question I have for you: when you first went to Ikaria for the first time 5 times ago, what was the first thing you changed when you got home?
Took down all the clocks. Yeah, so I still don't wear a watch. I think what I recognised is knowing the time generally either generates for people anxiety or guilt. Anxiety about the future, they're running late for something. Guilt, maybe they're feeling bad because they are late for something and they're arriving late. I've missed an appointment, whatever. But generally the clock, as much as it gives you the present time, it takes you out of the present moment. Ooh. And you recognise... I
feel like that's a title for a book right there if it isn't already being penned.
Yeah. You recognise in Ikaria that everything is ish and it freaks people out. We don't tell people it's not called a tour, it's called an experience, because we don't have a day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4 list. We have a list of activities that we will do sometimes over the 10 days. And if that freaks you out, you'll probably never come. But that's kind of the thing that's where the personal growth lives. Like, in the first year, I remember we had a flip chart and we tried to really Australianize and structure it. But now I just laugh at what we even attempted to do, because we attempted to bring our culture of workshops and learning styles into their culture. Whereas now I say, hey, folks, there is no yoga in Ikaria, so we don't do yoga. There are no meditation classes because they live meditatively. They walk the land and pick the strawberries and smell the lemons and go, oh, how good is life. They wake up in the morning and they water the garden, and you can just see them. They're just staring at the garden like what we would probably call meditating or practicing mindfulness or doing their breathing. They're actually just living their life, but they're just having these peak experiences through their own lifestyle, whether it's sweeping a patio or going for a stroll to a friend's house. Like, they know how to live. And so for me, it was, yes, learning how to live, take down the clocks. And then the next thing was cooking food, what many Mediterranean people would already know is family style. So instead of serving the kids their dinner on their own individual plates, it was more put the plates on the table, bring the food over in platters, and let them decide in their own innate way. Is it a day for more carbs and protein? Is it a day for more fats? Is it a day for them to have more cucumber than tomatoes, rather than me saying, here's your meat and 3 veg and controlling the portion? Let them control the portions, you know. Haven't really applied this other one, but smaller plates is always a thing that people take home from Ikaria. And again, a lot of Mediterranean cultures do this well, but we have created bigger plates. Ikarians still eat off the small plates, and no TV dinners. I've never been a TV dinner kind of guy, but that's one that people go, oh yeah, we kind of have fallen into the TV in front of the dinner in front of the TV. It's like, get back to the table. If one of the greatest mental health epidemic cures, I reckon, would be eating with others at a table, and ideally eating good food. And if you love a drop of good bread, a drop of wine, and having a good chat about your day and what's going on in life, because you don't solve problems over the world, of our personal world, over Netflix. I can tell you that much.
No, this is true. One of my mum's favourite sayings, and one of her favourite things to do, was having everybody's feet under the table, and to share dinner with all of her favourite people's feet under the table at the same time. That's the other important part. Not at different times, for sure.
And I just had sorry, go on.
No, you go.
I was just going to say, like, your mum, or I think of, like, I had a client the other day, newer client, so I had to go pretty hard on her on this. She was like, oh, my kids like to eat in their room.
Oh,
I'm like, sorry. I'm sorry. If this was Ikaria, or if this was a Dr. M's beautiful late mum, and your mum was such an angel, if it was dinner at your place, I'm sure it'd be like, hey, kids, if you want to eat, it's at this table. Yeah. It's not in your room. You're not going anywhere. And so I'm not going to pressure you to eat. I'm not going to drag you out of your room. But if you want to eat in your room, it's not under this house, and it's not with this family, because in our family, this is dinner. I'm saying, I'm sorry, but as a parent, you kind of have to be laying down the family culture, because how do you expect to pass on healthy habits to your children if you don't be firm in your highest values from time to time? And that is a slippery slope for a lot of parents.
I think the only time that I was allowed to eat in the lounge room. So the nature of our family home was you could actually see the television from our dining room table. So we each had our seats at the dining room table. When I was little, it was okay that we could have the television on the background. So there were times that I would say to Mum, can you move your shoulder so I can see the television? But we were always, you just ate at the table. It was just the rules. And as we got older, the television either got turned down or off. But when we were little, it's fascinating. My dad also, which my big brother still does with his kids, if they're not for some reason liking what's on the dinner table, it was always an option that Dad would get up and make us eggs. Is if we really didn't want what was in front of us, he would go, what style of eggs do you want instead? And my big brother still does that with his 3 girls to date. If they really are just not into it, he goes and makes some eggs.
That's like exactly. Some people cannot stand this conversation in terms of parenting styles, but we are like your brother. It's like it's egg. It's like a fried egg. But some parents will be like, no, what is cooked? It's like it's only one thing. I've got a foot in both camps here. Depends on my mood and how big the day is. How ranty I want to get to the kids about how lucky they are to be having what they're having. But I'm very clear on this. You've got to have very firm family values around food, because again, it's not just what you eat, it's how you eat, it's who you eat with, when you eat, where you eat, like at the table or on the couch. Like, these are big cultural life design decisions that if you don't make consciously, you will naturally, by way of the little culture we have here in Australia, you will fall down the slippery slope of fast food on the couch in front of the TV, watching everyone else's lives but never talking about your own lives. And you can say everything you want about Kim Kardashian, but if you don't know what's going on in the news of your own family, then you've got to improve the way that you eat, because it's very hard to not learn about your family dynamics when you're at the dining table, because you just will. But it's very easy to not know what's going on in the lives of your loved ones if you're not eating together.
Oh, so many mic drop moments, MP. So many mic drop moments. We could talk for hours on end. We have done it. Usually it is over usually a block of good dark chocolate and perhaps a glass of red. The red doesn't really agree with my metabolism anymore. Thanks, menopause. But
You're on the hard spirits.
I'm currently booze free even. So there you go. That just to surprise you. But it's I think one of the things that I love about what you're sharing with those lifestyle changes when you came home, and the awareness of sharing meals, feet under the table, being on a different clock, obviously. And now also, folks, whilst Marcus might say he doesn't have clocks, he's also very punctual. So he might, one-ish. He's got ways of telling what time it is. It might be where the sun's hitting his home.
That is the nuance of that is like living. I was almost going to say like bring up a calendar, but living in a life where you're running appointments, and even this is in Ikaria, I challenge them. I was like, well, but what about dropping kids to school or doctor's appointments? 100% know the time. Like, that's very important. We're talking about the time when it actually doesn't matter what time it is. Like when my kids walk past a phone and tap it to see the time, I'll pick them up on it because they don't know. They don't need to know the time. But do you know how endemic that is in our human behavior? We just tap the phone to check the time. It doesn't matter. And that's the time to not know the time, when it literally doesn't matter. But when it is important and you've got a plane to catch or a doctor's appointment, you've got to see Dr. M at MRC, you got a hot date. Like, if you've got a hot date, I promise you, do not be fashionably late. Don't use Ikaria time. That is a disrespect of your hot date's time. So don't do it. Don't take it literally. But euphemistically and philosophically, get on board and be itch about life.
I love that. And it reminds me, we were talking about the agenda that you have or don't have when taking tours of beautiful humans around Ikaria or Sardinia in the future, is that very similarly in the Ziva Life Collective retreats that we've run for the last 9 years, we have an agenda. I have one, but the people coming don't know what we're doing or when we're doing it. And I think that's the beauty of actually having trust in your facilitators or your tour guides or the people that are running the show, is just to know that they've got you. And I see it, and we see the cogs turning. It sounds like you too have experienced this, Marcus, where you see the cogs turning, particularly for those that like to be in control and are used to running to the clock at their time, no one else's time. Probably the same lady that was looking for her portion of bread, God love her, is that those cogs turning of, what do you mean I don't get to know what's actually happening? Or often I'm the logistics person on other adventures with groups of people. They're like, but what's happening next? I'm like, I do not need to tell you those details. Just actually go with the flow. And it's such a challenge for so many people. So I very much resonate with that. What sort of, why would people work with you, MP? What are they looking for when they end up jumping on your website, wanting to go, you know what, I want to have a conversation with Marcus? Or do people usually end up at one of your 2-day events first? Is there other ways of being able to figure out whether you're the right guy for them if they're trying to figure out some of the things we've been talking about today?
Yeah, look, a great question, and thank you for asking it. I think the nature of this conversation is a really good example of who I am and how I like to work with people. I'm very direct. I think we can have a big, deep and meaningful straight from the get-go. I don't generally ask a client how's the weather in their town. People that work with me just want to live an exceptional life, and they can feel that they've been settling for mediocrity either in their marriage, with their physical health, even in their spirit. They might feel like there's just something that I'm not living, and they want clarity. Some people, they sound very feminine. Most of my clients are women, but it's that feeling that like we're settling for something, and as a result, not being the best version of ourselves. And in society, it might be a bit of, is this as good as it gets? For others, it's like, I want a simple life, but I want it to be exceptional. I don't know anyone that wants a complicated life, but everyone I know wants to simplify their life. And many people get confused that a simple life is mediocre. I'm like, no. A simple life is exceptional. It's the exception to the rule. If you could actually congruently go, life purpose, tick, movement, tick, social, tick, nutrition, tick, family, tick, growth, tick, wealth, tick, spirit, tick. Like, that's pretty simple. It's only 8 ticks. I'm not saying 100 ingredients in this fine dining recipe of life. So people that work with me, they love the idea of the simplicity. They know there's complexity under there and there's nuance, but they also want to work with someone that is quite direct. I'm woo-woo, but I'm not esoteric, if that makes sense.
You're pretty direct, my friend.
It's time to get to work. But if we don't have an appreciation of the romance and the magic of life, a lot like innate intelligence, if we talk chiropractic for a minute, like, you've got to be very specific in what part of the spine that you are adjusting. But if you don't have a romantic interest in innate intelligence as a chiropractor, then you are purely a mechanic that has kind of lost the love of, what you do. So I feel like that about life. If you don't have an interest in the woo and the way things happen in your life and seeing the blessings in disguise of the challenges that you've been through, then you probably wouldn't like working with me. But if you like the idea of excelling at all areas of life, then do. If people want to, I don't have a lot of availability. I only work with clients 2 days a week because I couldn't be a 5-dayer, but I love being a 2-day a week longevity coach. There are links on my site too. I would say do the quiz and then book in a 30-minute discovery call where I'll actually be able to look at the quiz results. I'll be able to ascertain whether I think I can help, do a bit of a personality check, see if I like you and you like me. And then if that's the case, I'd invite people to a second call, a strategy session, and lay it all out from there.
Beautiful. Well, it's been an absolute pleasure as always. Now, before we go, I always finish with, usually I finish with my top 5, but because today's about you, I'm going to finish with your top 5, MP. So I hope you are prepared. Question 1 of your top 5.
I did.
Oh, excellent. I do pre-warn guests, by the way, Aligned You listeners, in case you're wondering whether I just drop it on them. I don't. I do give them a wee bit of a heads up. What's on high rotation of music-wise at the moment?
Music-wise is a playlist that I curated, called MP Cinematic, because I love soundtracks. So Hans Zimmer, Stephen Price, Chris Horner, Avatar or Gladiator. There's a song called Run Free, which just builds me up and I just love it. So, cinematic music, like the scores to movies, I absolutely love.
Awesome. What are you reading at the moment, or what many books are you reading at the moment? You're usually a couple of books on the go kind of guy.
Watching. I've got Les Mis by Victor Hugo. That is probably my favourite book of all time. And I'm reading that for the second time at the minute. On a professional level, for the business-minded, I'm reading the Story Brand Framework book by Donald Miller, which is a really good book if you really want to learn about how to communicate to the world about what you do. I'm really enjoying that. It's kind of like if you really are interested in how movies are written and they follow a framework, it's a great book to learn about how to communicate to a wider audience. Because if you're anything like me, Dr. M, you can kind of get stuck in the vocabulary that you use with clients. And, chiropractic's perfect, subluxation, like no one cares what a subluxation is. They just know they're sore here and they're sore there and can you help? So, getting out of your head of professional language and into the language of Pete the punter, as I like to say, like we've got that's a really good book for that. So I'm reading that for the third time.
Beautiful. What's your favourite way to de-stress, decompress and come back into alignment?
So reading at night after a big day, but I make sure my phone is nowhere near me, because if my phone's near me, I'll start researching what I'm reading. So I've got to be like on the couch without the phone. So reading in the morning, moving for sure. If I only do one thing in the morning, it's move, and I can just feel my body's ready to go. But chiropractic is massive. Naturally, I'm biased. I am married to a chiropractor. I get adjusted every week, and if I don't, I see Dr. Margaret Tay in Byron, because I feel like trying to get adjusted at home with the kids around, too stressful for Sarah, too hard for me. So they'd be the three for me.
Beautiful. What is your favourite quote at the moment, or of all time, or both?
No, I do love Socrates. The unexamined life is not worth living. Again, I'm a journalist by profession, right? By a very old profession. But so the devil's in the detail. Don't know who came up with that one, but when you don't examine your life, you feel like the devil is controlling you, in that like you're a victim to your life. But when you examine your life, you can have a lot of aha moments. So yeah, unexamined life is not worth living. So let's get examining.
Beautiful. And last but not least, final thoughts for the Aligned You listeners, my beautiful friend.
Well, I think final thoughts is just remember that longevity is not some random little niche topic. It's not something that is Tats Lotto numbers like a lot of people used to think it was. If you're 40 right now, you're a 1 in 5 chance to hit 100. If you're 70, you're a 1 in 10. So if you're sitting around a table at a dinner party, it's not like no one's going to get there. people are going to get there. So longevity is becoming mainstream, but I get frustrated in the medical approach to longevity, like it's your genes or it's your missing NMN that's not growing your NAD type medical approach to longevity. We've got to be very mindful that longevity is a lifestyle game, which is why I like to interview people that have got there, because you recognize that it's not the pills they took, it's not the potions they had, it's not how much they meditated or the breath work or the ice baths. It's the fact that they could pick themselves up off the canvas time and time again, and that adversity made them resilient, and with that resilient, that gave them optimism. That optimism gave them self-esteem and self-love. So we've got to be really mindful that longevity is a nuanced game, as we've spoken about on this podcast, but longevity is not something that won't happen to you. It will. So get prepared. Don't delay. Make the important, not urgent, important and urgent, because if you wait for it to become urgent, I could guarantee you it's going to be too late. So get cracking and embrace longevity. Quick, smart.
Oh, many mic drops. So much gold today, MP. An absolute pleasure having you on Aligned You again. Thank you for agreeing to jump back on the mic with me. That's it for this week, Aligned You listeners. Bye for now, and we'll catch you next time.
And that's it for today's episode, Aligned You listeners. Remember to hit the 5-star ratings and share today's episode with your friends. And be sure to join our collective on Facebook and Instagram at Aligned You. Look forward to catching you next time. The information shared on Aligned You podcast is of general nature and for information purposes only. It is not specific medical or personal advice. You should seek assistance from your healthcare practitioner for your individual circumstances. Any information provided doesn't imply endorsement or third-party devices or products and cannot provide you with health and medical advice.